Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery. Today I'm going to be making some mini eucalyptus and also some lavender. For the lavender I'm going to use this 1/8 inch orchid paper and then 1/8 inch leaf green for the eucalyptus. To roll it I'm going to use my Savvy slotted tool from Quilt Creations, mostly because I like the really small tip on here. If you wanted to use any other slotted tool or a needle tool, that'll work just fine. I will be using tweezers and scissors for a moment. Small paintbrush, always helpful. For glue, I'm going to mostly be using my Elmer's in the small bottle. Tacky glue comes in later, and if you have a hot glue gun, you might want to grab that as well. And then I'm also going to be using my wax paper board just for dipping with some glue. I also have a damp paper towel to the side here just to wipe my fingers off. These pieces are going to be really small, so your fingers might get a little gluey. That might come in handy. Starting off a little different today, the eucalyptus and the lavender are both going to be made on stems, so you're going to need some extra tools. I have 18 gauge copper wire and some wire snips here, pretty inexpensive tools. I'm going to be wrapping the wire in some green floral tape. There might be a better way to do this. I'm not a floral design, expert here. But what I do is just snip off about, these are going to be pretty small, so this is about 5 inches or so of the copper wire. And then I just simply wrap the floral tape around. And what seems to happen is there's a glue type substance on the inside of the floral tape, and it just sort of sticks to itself with, I guess when the heat of your fingers warms up the glue so it's tacky enough that it kind of sticks to itself. Once I get it wrapped as thinly as possible, I don't really want any big bumps or anything like that, try to smush those down, get it to the end, give it a little snip with your scissors. And this is what we're going to use for the stem for both the eucalyptus and the lavender. It's pretty sturdy, it doesn't really bend, but it gives enough substance that you can use these stems to hold up your plant pretty nicely. Now we're going to start rolling the eucalyptus. This paper I mentioned before, 1/8 inch wide. It comes from Lake City Craft, so it's going to be about 24 inches long. I'm going to tear off one end, that's going to be the end that I glue later. The other end doesn't need to be torn. That's going to go right on my tool, and I'm going to wind this all the way to the end. Sometimes the long strips get a little unruly as you're rolling, so if you need to take that off your tool, if it starts kind of being difficult to maintain, go ahead and do that. I usually get about halfway, and then I say, you know what? This will be a lot easier if I just do this by hand, so that's how I'm going to finish the roll. Once I get it all the way to the end, I'm going to let it relax just a little bit in my fingers, and then I'm going to, there you go, relax it a little bit so it opens up right in the center. And then I'm going to use my Elmer's in my needle bottle to put a very small dot of glue and press that down to keep that shape. So it's essentially a tight coil with a little bit of openness in the center, because that's going to help when we start forming our eucalyptus leaf here. To do that, I'm pinching one side and then pushing the back in. Again, that's a good pinch on one side and then kind of a shove it in there with my thumb. And that's making sort of a loose heart shape, almost a triangle. But what I do want to do is on the underneath, give it a thin layer of glue and brush that out, because we want to keep that shape. Putting a layer of glue on the underside is going to help that leaf stay the way you like it. And then you can put that aside to dry. You're going to need an even amount for each eucalyptus because they grow kind of side by side on the stem. So I would go for 8 or 10. These are pretty small leaves. These aren't going to be big, huge silver dollar size. You can add more paper if you want to make them bigger. So we're going to make some small eucalyptus with those. Now moving on to the lavender. We're going to take that orchid paper. This is the same brand, also 1/8 inch wide, but we only need small little bits for this lavender. They're going to be super simple, just about 1-inch pieces there. Rip those off. You're going to need a whole bunch, but I'm only making just the one here because I think, well, I think stuck to me. I think you're going to catch on pretty quick to what I'm doing here. Just putting that strip in my tool and rolling it all the way, start to finish. Add a little bit of glue while it's still on the tool because we don't need this to open up at all. Come on, glue. There we go. Side note, when you're working with these needle nose bottles, they're great, but if you don't lay them down upside down, sometimes they will get a tiny clog on them, just like that one did. I usually have a little coffee cup nearby, an old coffee cup with another piece of damp paper towel in there, and I just lay it upside down so that the wet glue is continuously going towards the tip, and that'll prevent clogs. But regardless, I put a little bit of glue on the end, rolled it all the way, and what it made is tiny little tight roll. This is just a little peg, and like I said, you're going to need a whole mess of those, somewhere between, I would say, about 18 to 20, and that's going to be that's going to be what we use for each individual lavender bud. Once you have all your lavender bits made, we're going to start putting them together. So I'm going to use some tweezers. I already have some tacky glue in a little puddle here on my wax paper, and I'm going to be using the tweezers to kind of dip them into the glue. And this is going to be sort of a trust the process moment, so please bear with me because this might not look like anything until we're done. To start with, I take one, dip it in, and put it right on the edge of my floral tape wrapped wire. Tacky glue, if you haven't used it before, the name, as the name implies, it doesn't dry super quickly, but things will hold in place fairly quickly. The key is not to use a ton of glue because a ton of glue will make things kind of move around, but it will have things stick but not be completely dry pretty quickly. And after we get the one, we're going to put 4 around in kind of a layer slightly underneath. And I find it works really well if you sort of angle them out and just put a small dot of glue on the one corner that's going to hit the stem like so. So it's right underneath and it's kind of poking out a little bit. And there you can see that. I also sort of blow on them a little bit to help this glue along. Now I'm going to go right on the other side. That's even a little bit extra glue that I might take even longer to set there. Pull that close. I'm trying to blow on them around the camera here, so it's a little awkward, but making it work. So again, we still have the one on top and then one on each side. Ooh. And then I'm going to put one between those two, right there, and then put that to stay. You can do it. You can do it. There we go. There we go. And then one on, the other side of that, and that'll make 4 sort of in a circle, another row underneath that first one that we put in the middle. And I will tell you, for some reason, that first layer is the hardest one. That's the one that never wants to stay. That's the one that sort of keeps moving around and takes the longest to set. I don't know why, but that's sort of what you're looking for, is a semi-even cluster. And then we're going to put another row around, slightly underneath, but between the 4 that we put. So another 4 going in between the last round. So again, kind of angle it out a little bit and just a little bit lower. And if you remember, I did say in the beginning that If you have a hot glue gun around, you might be wondering why I'm not using that for this. Wouldn't that be easier? Wouldn't that be faster? It definitely would be faster. I have found, particularly with the lavender, because these pieces are so small, you can just end up seeing a lot of glue between the pieces, and it makes it kind of blobby. And again, this is, like I said, just trust what's going on here. I'm still working on putting that next layer of 4 in between and right below the first layer of 4. The hot glue, it's just too much for these small, delicate lavender. We're going to be using that for the eucalyptus. I'm sure there's people out there who are like super precise with their hot glue. I find I get a little messy with it. So if you're really confident in your hot glue skills, by all means, that'll go a lot faster for this part of the project. But for me, it just ends up being a bit too much glue. So we're going to keep going around and around, 4 layers every time, underneath and in between the layer before it. And I think I get about 4 layers, and it looks like a pretty full lavender blossom. It's okay if they're not perfect. When you get the overall effect, it really does look like a bunch of lavender buds on the end of a stem. So keep going until it's as full as you like, and set it aside to dry. I would recommend finding a small bowl or a jar or something that this can stand up slightly while it's drying, because you don't want your buds to move once you get them in place. I actually have a little plastic baby food container that I've had in my workstation since my children were babies eating baby foods. This is very old, but it's a really great size just for holding little bits of stems. Let that dry, and there is one of your lavender buds. Now for the eucalyptus, they're all made, they're all been glued, and they're all dry. I have my hot glue gun warmed up here. I have another stem. I'm going to get to it. So a very, very, very small dot of hot glue on the broad side of one of the eucalyptus, and I'm going to put that right at the very tip of the stem, on one side of the tip, looking something like that. And then I'm going to take another very small dot of glue, and that one is going to go right across the street from the first one. So what we're looking for is them to be on either side of the stem, right next to each other. I'm going to keep going, making a few rows. This is another thing that's tricky to juggle on the other side of a camera. There's a couple times when I'm doing this and I feel like I'm going to drop the hot glue gun right on my lap. These probably about 3/4 of an inch or so away from each other, the 2 different layers. Doesn't have to be perfectly even. If you do not have a hot glue gun, tacky glue will work just fine for this project, or Elmer's. They just will take longer for them to set, and that's totally fine. I was going for 5 layers of leaves here, but then I dropped one on the ground, and instead of picking it up, I decided I'll just go with 4. I think everybody gets the picture. As long as they're even, that's going to look like a perfect eucalyptus. So here are some examples all together. You can make little bouquets out of these. You can add them to your quilling cards, even though they have that 3-dimensional stem. They'll still work nicely since the rest of the card is going to have some kind of bulk to it, or any kind of framed quilling. I like to just put them in a little vase and leave them around the house because they'll look good forever. And I also have an older post on my website where I made the same eucalyptus and lavender but on a larger scale. And then I had an additional project where I turned them into a wreath, which I think this post was in 2017, and that wreath still looks in good shape today. But however you use the eucalyptus or the lavender, I hope you think about using the same kind of floral stems for different flower projects. I'll link to some down below. Also, with any other supplies you might need. Any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll answer as soon as I can. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.